Well, in the last few minutes, we've heard from the Duke of Sussex, who has released a statement. This is what he says. In 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in history. It meant that every allied nation was obliged to stand with the United States in Afghanistan in pursuit of our shared security. Allies answered that call. Prince Harry goes on to say, "I served there, I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there. The United Kingdom alone had 457 service personnel killed. Thousands of lives were changed forever. Mothers and fathers buried, sons and daughters. Children were left without a parent. Families are left carrying the cost. Those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect, as we all remain united and loyal to the defence of diplomacy and peace." The words there in the last few moments of Prince Harry.
Let's talk about timing, because timing is everything. Just days after Donald Trump casually claimed that the United States never needed NATO and suggested that Allied forces were basically chilling a little off the front lines during the Afghanistan war, Prince Harry released a statement so grounded, so factual, and so quietly devastating that it felt less like commentary and more like a history lesson delivered by someone who was actually there. And that's the part some people still don't seem to grasp. Prince Harry isn't speaking from theory. He's not reading from a briefing. He's not recycling talking points from a campaign rally. He's speaking as someone who served, who deployed, who lost friends, and who watched the cost of war unfold in real time. So today, we're going to unpack why this statement matters, why it hit when it did, why it's making certain people deeply uncomfortable, and why it exposes the difference between performative patriotism and actual service. Because this isn't just about Trump. It's about truth. It's about respect. And it's about refusing to erase the sacrifices of thousands of Allied troops with a shrug and a soundbite. Let's get into it. Prince Harry begins his statement by reminding the world of a fact that is not up for debate. In 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in its history. That matters. Article 5 is not symbolic. It is the backbone of the alliance. It means an attack on one is an attack on all. It means shared risk, shared responsibility, shared sacrifice. And when that call was made after 9/11, Allied nations answered. They didn't hesitate, they didn't hang back, they didn't stay off the front lines, they showed up. Harry then does something very deliberate and very powerful. He doesn't speak abstractly. He doesn't say troops or forces like they're chess pieces. He makes it personal. He says, "I served there, I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there." That single sentence dismantles a lot of nonsense all by itself. Because suddenly, this isn't about opinion, it's about lived reality. And lived reality has a way of punching holes straight through revisionist history. Then he names the cost. The United Kingdom alone lost 457 service personnel in Afghanistan, 457 people who never came home, 457 families whose lives were permanently altered, thousands more wounded, thousands more living with trauma that doesn't vanish when the war is declared over. And this is where Harry's statement becomes something more than a response. It becomes an act of remembrance. He talks about mothers and fathers burying sons and daughters, children growing up without parents, families carrying grief long after the headlines moved on. This is the part that politicians who love big talk almost always skip, because it's inconvenient, because it doesn't fit neatly into slogans, because it demands humility. Trump's remarks reduced Allied forces to background characters. Harry restores them to the center of the story. And let's be clear, saying the U.S. never needed NATO while benefiting from the first ever invocation of Article 5 is not just wrong, it's historically illiterate. NATO allies didn't just show solidarity, they paid for it in blood. British troops fought and died. Canadian troops fought and died. Danish, Australian, Polish, Dutch troops fought and died. To suggest they were a little off the front lines is not only false, it's disrespectful in the most literal sense of the word. And Harry doesn't shout this. He doesn't posture, he doesn't insult. He simply states reality and lets the weight of it land. That restraint is important because it highlights something else entirely. This is what leadership looks like when it's not obsessed with dominance or applause. Harry isn't trying to score points. He's not auditioning for a crowd. He's protecting the dignity of people who can no longer speak for themselves. And that's why the statement hits so hard. Notice, too, what Harry does not say. He doesn't glorify war. He doesn't pretend it was noble or clean or uncomplicated. He doesn't wrap it in flag-waving mythology. Instead, he ends by calling for sacrifices to be spoken about truthfully and with respect, while remaining loyal to the defense of diplomacy and peace. That line matters, because people who actually understand war tend to value peace more, not less. People who have buried friends don't usually romanticize conflict, and that's the difference between someone who's lived it and someone who talks about it for applause. And this is exactly why this statement made waves.
Because it quietly exposes a pattern we've seen again and again. People who have never served, never deployed, never stood next to a coffin draped in a flag often speak the loudest about what service really means. Meanwhile, someone who did serve is telling you, calmly, that erasing Allied sacrifice is unacceptable. There's also a deeper layer here that deserves attention. Prince Harry is often accused of being anti-British or anti-military by the same media ecosystem that thrives on outrage. And yet, here he is, defending British troops, honoring British losses, and speaking with more reverence for service families than many of his loudest critics ever have. That contradiction alone should make people pause. But it won't, because for some, the issue was never what Harry says, it's that he says it without permission. He no longer needs to filter his words through palace optics or institutional silence. And what he's chosen to do with that freedom is tell the truth, thoughtfully, respectfully, without erasure. And that, apparently, is threatening. What also stands out is how this moment shows Harry operating on a global stage, not as a royal mascot, but as a veteran and advocate. He's not speaking for NATO. He's not speaking against anyone by name. He's speaking for memory and against distortion. And when you place his statement next to Trump's remarks, the contrast is almost embarrassing. On one side, bravado, dismissal, oversimplification. On the other, context, humanity, and historical accuracy. One reduces allies to a footnote, the other honors them as equals. And here's the uncomfortable truth some people don't want to sit with. You cannot claim to respect the military while minimizing the sacrifices of Allied troops. You cannot claim to honor service while rewriting history to suit your narrative. Respect is not selective. Harry understands that, and because he understands it, he says what needs to be said, even if it's inconvenient. This is also why the statement resonates beyond politics, because it speaks to something universal. The idea that truth matters, memory matters, and the dead deserve better than to be erased for rhetoric. It also reinforces why Harry remains such a polarizing figure, not because he's reckless, but because he's independent. He doesn't speak on cue, he doesn't echo power, he challenges comfortable lies simply by refusing to participate in them. And for anyone paying attention, that's exactly what happened here. No press conference, no drama, no spectacle, just a statement that quietly said, allies showed up, people died, and we owe them honesty. So when people ask why Prince Harry still commands attention on global issues, this is your answer. It's not the title, it's not the lineage, it's credibility, it's experience, it's the willingness to speak with empathy instead of ego. And whether critics like it or not, this moment reinforces something very clear. When it comes to Afghanistan, NATO, and military sacrifice, Prince Harry knows exactly what he's talking about. Because he was there, because he lost friends, because he remembers. And in a world full of loud forgetfulness, that kind of clarity is powerful. So yes, breaking news, indeed. Not because it's explosive, but because it's true. And sometimes truth is the most disruptive thing of all.